Survey shows American people today better housed than any people in history. When I first read that on the release, I thought to myself, they call that news? Everyone knows that, even using the word in the broadest sense. We are housed in more comfortable homes and apartments. We buy in more efficient stores and shopping centers. We work in healthier offices and factories. We know all this. But how many people know how this amazing progress came about? Where does the money come from? Because of the millions, I mean billions of dollars it takes for this tremendous building program. In fact, it's impossible for the human mind to grasp the total amount of money that has been required to build the America we know today. Where then does all this money come from? Now we're getting to the point that is news, the point this survey makes. And to me, it's a fascinating story, one on which I have had reason to do some interesting research. It really started when the first settlers came to this country, on their road to better living. Those sturdy forebears of ours were willing to endure the hardships of the early American wilderness for the sake of personal freedom. And one of the greatest rewards of that freedom was the opportunity to build their own homes and become owners of property, modest though it might be. In the next 100 years, settlements grew and flourished, and the folks who worked hard and were thrifty could build better homes and better farms. The settlements became towns and cities. Trade and commerce started. Artisans and merchants expanded their shops and stores. The spirit of the free world had taken root in North America, and the winning of American independence charted its future course. By the late 18th and early 19th century, average citizens, as here in Williamsburg, were beginning to have savings in excess of their immediate needs. This started them looking for the way to provide long-range protection for their dependents. To satisfy this need, life insurance companies were organized, and people began taking out policies. The funds accumulated from the premium payments were invested by these companies from the very first in such safe securities as mortgage loans on real estate. And mortgage loans have become a traditional form of investment for these institutions. At about the same time, savings banks were granted charters by the states, and the savings of individuals were not only safeguarded, but channeled into further community enterprises. The rest of the century witnessed unprecedented growth and expansion as American frontiers swept westward toward the Pacific. New towns and cities sprang up in the wake of transcontinental railroads, and across the land new industries were born. Much of the expansion during this century was provided for by private capital, and many large individual fortunes and industrial empires were thus founded. But as time went on and the country kept on growing, individual fortunes were no longer adequate to finance the continued expansion. During these years, however, the insurance payments and savings accounts of millions of small savers piled up enormously. These funds of all these small savers are put to work for the American economy. Good for the small savers and good for the economy. The trustees of life insurance companies, savings banks, savings and loan associations, commercial banks, and pension funds must invest with a minimum of risk. Outstanding among such investments are mortgages, interest-bearing loans on homes, and other buildings. In 1934, the government cooperated with private business in creating FHA. FHA was born in the Depression. When nothing much was economically sound, here was a sound idea. Faced with a national need for more homes and a more consistent supply of mortgage money to build them, FHA came to the rescue by insuring long-term, low monthly payment mortgage loans. Home ownership was made possible for additional millions of families and stimulated a tremendous volume of construction. Now, most of the great saving and lending institutions were in the older parts of the country. Thus, insurance premiums and savings deposits tended to concentrate in the East. These institutions began to make mortgage loans in the areas from which the premiums came. As this practice grew, a new profession came into being. The profession of mortgage banking. You see how it grew naturally in response to the needs of the country. The mortgage banker is a specialist who obtains loans, large and small, for people in his own area from any number of local and national institutions. In doing this, he brings funds for construction into his hometown which would not be available locally. And after the mortgage is executed, he handles all the details for both the investor and borrower until the loan is paid off. It's quite obvious that these specialists, the mortgage bankers, play a leading part in the country's progress on the road to better living for us all. But what are mortgage bankers like? Well, about like any other hard-working businessman. Suppose we visit one, James Chandler. Let's follow this caller, Mr. Leonard Mercer of the Pasco Products Corporation, who was referred to Jim Chandler by a mortgage banker in the area of Pasco's home office.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes.
I'm Mr. Chandler's secretary. Won't you please?
Thank you. It's quite an attractive office you have here.
Thank you. Mr. Chandler's waiting for you.
Come in, Mr. Mercer. This your first visit here?
Yes, it is.
We hope it won't be your last.
Well, that may depend on you, Mr. Chandler. We're decentralizing our operations. We're going to build a new plant somewhere in this part of the country. We're looking for a site. Your city is one of several under consideration, but before we decide, there are a number of problems to be resolved. Would you be interested in exploring these with us?
We certainly are interested. This would be a fine thing for the city. There are several properties here I think you'll find very suitable. Here's one. Over here's another. But there's one. Just so happens there's a shopping center going up right near that spot. That would be convenient for your people.
Yes, it would.
The railroad's already assured us that spur track can easily be extended to this area.
And that's the kind of information we need.
Suppose I take you to see George Christie, the industrial secretary of the Chamber of Commerce. He has all these facts at his fingertips, locations, freight rates, electric power, and so on.
Well, that would be fine. When can you arrange it?
Whenever you say.
And the sooner the better.
Have you been in touch with the city council?
Not yet. That's another thing we'd like to be sure of, a cooperative local government.
You'll have no worry here. George Christie, please. After we've talked with the chamber, I'll take you to see the city manager and the commissioner of public works. Hello, George. Jim Chandler. Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Say, George, I have a gentleman I'd like to bring over to talk about locating a factory here. I thought you would. 11? Fine, we'll be there.
You don't waste much time.
Well...
But that's what we heard about you. Now, if our plans work out, I understand you're in a position to arrange the construction financing as well as the permanent mortgage loan.
Yes, we have good connections with our local banks for construction money. And when the building is completed, we can place a permanent mortgage with one of our institutional investors.
Good. Now, there's one other aspect of this move that's important to us. It's housing. You see, we'll be bringing in a number of our people, and we have to have some assurance that homes will be available for them. How is the local housing situation?
Well, frankly, it's a little tight at the moment.
That's disappointing.
Oh, not necessarily. Let that be our problem. Well, we can start over there now if you want to. If you're coming in here, Mr. Mercer, and your people need housing, it's up to us to see that you get it. And we'll get it for you.
Mr. Chandler.
Yes, Henry.
On Frank Houston's home mortgage, we've arranged to defer his payment this month. He's out of the hospital now. He'll be back on the job soon.
Glad you took care of him. He's a good man. Has a good record with us.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chandler.
Is that your usual practice?
Oh, yes, when there's a good reason. The lending institutions allow us reasonable discretion in cases of emergency. I'll see him tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
They recognize their responsibility to the borrowers in many ways. Let's go.
As the two men walk along the street, they come to some current construction being financed by Chandler and Company. A little farther along, they pass several substantial older buildings put up more than a quarter of a century ago, when Jim's father, James H. Chandler Sr., was head of the firm. Chandler and Mercer pick up George Christie at the Chamber of Commerce and move on to the city manager's office. All agree that the city council will have to authorize the water company to extend the necessary mains. The city manager assures them this can be done, as well as anything else that will help the move. The meeting ends on a high note of enthusiasm. Jim Chandler is pleased, but he knows full well all the work that still will have to be done behind the scenes if this project is really to get off the ground. The next day finds him calling on Phil Regan, a local builder with a good reputation. Jim wants Regan to build a number of new houses on the old Whipple property.
All right, I'll try to have it for you by Thursday. Okay.
Phil, this is the kind of home we're looking for.
It's the best group of homes in that price class we've had yet. They'll go well on that Whipple tract. But, Jim, I've got about all the work I can handle right now. I'd like to do it for you, Jim, but I just can't see my way clear.
This isn't for Jim Chandler or Phil Regan. This is for the city. A brand new industry, new employment, new business all along the line. Phil, no matter what other inducements we offer them, we can't bring them in here if we can't house them.